Doctor is back as the Fourth Doctor for a brand new era of adventures on Big Finish, as today we'll be taking a look at one of the most recent Fourth Doctor box set releases that is in fact the complete Series 8 Volume 1, the Syndicate Masterplan. Now this was originally released in January 2019 and does of course feature the Fourth Doctor alongside the brand new companion who is of course WPC and Kelso, as portrayed by Jane Slavin. This is in fact a review that I never expected to be doing. So basically how this review came about, for some reason a rare thing has happened on this channel where I am actually ahead of reviews, meaning that I actually have a whole week of videos where nothing is going on because I'm completely up to date. Therefore I decided, because I'm that kind, I thought I would do a further 2 Big Finish reviews and actually take a look at the most recent Fourth Doctor adventures, simply because it is 2 further Big Finish releases. I've not reviewed much Tom Baker, and this is in fact a rather exciting era for the Fourth Doctor, and one of which that I was really intrigued to listen to. So in simple terms, basically, I don't give myself a break at all. When I have a week off, I don't have a week off. I decide to give myself even more work to do because that's how passionate I am about this bloody channel. So first off, and as always, in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It is currently out now. The physical box set is in fact at £25 and the download is £20. However, this will be going up to the normal recommended retail price of £35 and £30 for the download at the end of February 2019. And that is actually at the current time of filming very, very soon. So basically, if you like what you hear in this review, I certainly recommend checking out the first volume of the Fourth Doctor adventures very soon in order to get it at the slightly cheaper price. Of course, as per usual, all the story details and casting information are on the Big Finish website, and you can also listen to the trailer as well as viewing it on the official Doctor Who YouTube channel and the official Big Finish YouTube channel. So this is in fact the second year of Big Finish's brand new Fourth Doctor format, where they decide to release all the Fourth Doctor adventures that are normally released over the first 8 months of the year in 2 box sets by themselves, because it's basically a little bit cheaper than actually releasing them singularly. I do believe that normally they're around £10 per CD, and now they've decided to do these box sets, they are a lot more cheaper to buy in physical form. It's generally a lot better and sufficient for Big Finish, and it means that they can do some rather interesting stories which beforehand I think would have been a little bit of a challenge to do in the singular release format, where we have in fact a rather big blockbuster series that is separated out between 2 box sets. So as per usual, much like with the 8th Doctor era and any other classic series box set really, this box set in fact features 4 Fourth Doctor adventures, all of which are singular adventures that go to completely different locations. However, there is a little bit of a plot thread that is intertwined throughout, and almost a few elements that are used throughout the different stories, which is rather nice in order to give the series a big and more impactful feel. So the first episode is the Sinestron Kill, as written by Andrew Smith. The second episode is Planet of the Drashigs, as written by Phil Mulrine, and then episode 3 is The Enchantress of Numbers, as written by Simon Baynard and Paul Morris, and then the final episode of this box set that is also continued in the Syndicate Masterplan Volume 2 is The False Guardian, as written by Guy Adams. The whole episode is directed by Nicholas Briggs, the producer is David Richardson, the script editor is John Dorney, and as per usual, the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haigh-Ellery. So firstly, talking about the Doctor himself, of course as played by Tom Baker, one of the most iconic Doctors of them all, and once again it is very unusual that he is one of the most iconic Doctors in the show, and yet that I've not really listened to too many of his Big Finish adventures, so it is very nice to be able to listen to a whole box set, especially within this brand new era. Of course, when this is set in the Fourth Doctor's timeline, he has just left Leela behind on Gallifrey after the invasion of time, and it is before the events of the Key to Time with Romana and the Ribos operation. So it's nice to have almost a midpoint era version of the Fourth Doctor. He is very comical as per usual, but also has a very mysterious side, and I think that generally his relationship with Anne Kelso is very warm. It's lovely to see him with a new character. It is very unusual at the same time, because I do believe that this is the first ever time that Big Finish have actually gave the Fourth Doctor a brand new companion. It is a brand new relationship, and and they bounce off each other rather well. I think it's a rather warm relationship, and the Doctor kind of respects Anne Kelso, but also at the same time she kind of respects him, even though she doesn't really know too much about his background or where he comes from. She simply kind of takes everything in her stride, and I think that the Fourth Doctor in this box set was really enjoyable. I think that with Tom Baker, no matter what mood you are in, when you listen to a story that he is involved in, you always have a really enjoyable listen. He is really easy to listen to, because the story almost seems to flow absolutely effortlessly, simply because of the way that he portrays the Doctor. It's now got to the point where Tom Baker isn't an actor. Tom Baker is literally the Doctor himself. That is his personality. And then, of course, talking about the companion herself, WPC Anne Kelso, as portrayed by Jane Slavin, arguably the main vocal point of this box set, because she's the new companion for the Fourth Doctor. As I previously addressed, it is a very important part of the Fourth Doctor's era and a rather big move for Big Finish. It is fair to say that both Jane Slavin and Tom Baker have a pre-existing relationship off camera, or off the recording, I suppose, within the studio, which I think certainly helps their relationship. And it is something of which that does once again flow incredibly easily, and it is nice to have a character that comes from a background of authority. Of course, as the title suggests, Anne Kelso is in fact a police officer from around the mid-1970s, so when this would actually be airing on television, if this was an episode past the invasion of time, which is a rather nice little touch. And what I like about her is she is independent. However, she's kind of an earthly version of Leela, bearing in mind that we had originally Sarah Jane, a rather stereotypical screaming female kind of companion. Then we moved on to Leela, that was very tribal and savage, and then slowly by the end she became a very strong female character. And then we kind of moved to this other version of Leela almost, but an earthly version, an earthly human, that is in fact strong, strong-willed, and really, really respectful of the Doctor, but also at the same time she's kind of quirky and fun. I think that she very much settles into the audio format very nicely. It is clear that Jane Slavin has in fact done many audio dramas before, and I must admit my first impressions of Anne Kelso is in fact really, really good. I think that she's a really positive character. I thoroughly enjoyed her performance, and as I say, it's nice to have another companion for the Fourth Doctor who we haven't exactly seen on screen. And the most important point about her character that I want to raise in this review, her background. She's a police officer. She is somebody of which that is very similar to Yaz that we have recently seen in Doctor Who Series 11. I think that both of these characters are very similar in their career choices. However, it just goes to show how the TV show decides to tackle that role, and then how Big Finish decides to tackle that role. Throughout all of the episodes in this release, you have Tom Baker actually acknowledging the fact that Anne Kelso is a police officer. Of course, the first story is in fact completely based around the police, and then the next episodes kind of see her utilise those skills, which is something we basically have next to none of throughout Doctor Who Series 11, so it kind of shows how both of them tackle those different situations. And so far, I'm definitely seeing a much more stronger policewoman figure in Anne Kelso than I was with Yaz Khan in Doctor Who Series 11. So since we are in fact talking about police, we may as well go on to the first story of the box set, which is the Sinestron Kill, as written by Andrew Smith. Now this episode is basically the new beginnings of the Fourth Doctor. He is now travelling alone, he has left Leela behind, he has left K9 behind, and he is in the process of building his new version of K9 to kind of keep him company on the TARDIS. Where at the very start of the story he realises that there is a rather unusual energy flow coming from Earth, and the Doctor, being the curious Doctor that he is, he decides to investigate, and he in fact walks in on a little bit of gang crime in a rather normal looking suburban shop with a rather normal looking shopkeeper. And basically they have a devotion between wanting to kill him, and there is numerous attempts throughout the story in order to kill him. And because this is an episode based on gang crime, naturally we have Scotland Yard being involved and the police force, and it is really nice to see the Doctor actually interact with of people who are inspecting a murder case, because we see him getting involved within the actual story itself, and we also see the inspectors kind of getting a little bit annoyed at his involvement. He's always trying to get his foot almost in the door and get involved within the different situations and do many things that the inspectors and the police believe are almost compromising the case. And it turns out, of course, that this episode has a much more alien twist. I think it would be no spoiler to say. And I think that generally the main key point of this story is, of course, Anne Kelso introducing that character, and it is a perfect choice in order to have an episode based around the police, because it naturally introduces her background, her daily life, without kind of trying to do a story that is completely different. It's almost a little bit like Smith and Jones, where you have that first episode where you have Martha training to be a doctor, therefore we are going to base the whole episode within a hospital. It's kind of all based around that location. This episode does also introduce the main plot of this box set, which is of course relating to the Syndicate Masterplan, and I think that it is a really nice way to introduce this new theme, because you do very much realise that there is a power that is beyond this actual story, kind of controlling different things. However, you don't know too much about them. It is a nice mystery, and it is a very nice way to actually introduce the box set, and more so introduce Anne Kelso and actually bring her onto the TARDIS. And I think that the main moment for me that I really enjoyed in this story, naturally for any companion, is that moment when they go onto the TARDIS for the first time. And I think that Anne Kelso's sort of reaction to the TARDIS is something of which that is different, and it's really refreshing, and therefore I really enjoyed listening to it. And once again, it was obvious from the beginning that Tom and the Fourth Doctor quite obviously respected her and kind of left the door open for Anne to walk into the TARDIS in order to join him on adventures almost on her own accord. Episode 2 of the box set is Planet of the Drashigs, as written by Phil Mulrine, and this episode has a really lovely novelty behind it, simply because it is the return of the Drashigs from the Carnival of Monsters. What is not to like? But this episode, once again, takes it to another level, because from what I can recall, in the Carnival of Monsters, the Drashigs were essentially this monster that was incorporated within the actual story, and they didn't really have much of a motive. They were almost just a creature to lurk in the background, look cool, but also at the same time look a little bit threatening and also a little bit unusual as well. This episode builds on that. It takes it to a new level, and it actually starts to show some of the instincts of the Drashigs, where they come from, and actually the different environments that they come from, to the extent in this episode where we see the Doctor and Anne Kelso travel off to a far distant world in order to actually give Anne Kelso a taste of sort of society in the future, what the humans have then gone on to do. However, the Doctor in fact arrives on Drashig World, that is pretty much the Alton Towers equivalent, sort of with lots of Drashigs in there, and it's basically a zoo with lots of different versions of Drashig from many different places. You have the Swamp Drashigs, as seen in the Carnival of Monsters, and then you also have some other brilliant examples of Drashigs in there as well, including the Albino Burrowing Drashig from Underground. Then you have the Desert Drashig, and then you also have the deadliest of them all, the tiny Emerald Drashig, which is what the episode is in fact focused around, because you have this Drashig that is very small, yet also at the same time has powers beyond the normal Drashig. So once again, Big Finish have basically got this villain and said, right, what can we do with it to make them more interesting and make them more than just this monster that basically causes loud bangs, crashes and chaos. Instead, we're going to give them a personality, we're going to give them a background, and we're going to give them a focus, and this story very much delivers that. And I think that it is certainly on the same level as the first episode, where it is really fast-paced, considering that it is only 1 hour long. It is incredibly perfect for new listeners, because the plot itself isn't anything too complex. It doesn't go off on any tangents. It is simply, this is the narrative, this is the adventure that we want to tell, and this is the way we are going to tell it. It's really fun, really fast-paced, and very new series. The thing about Planet of the Drashigs is it is very obvious what is going to happen. You have this pretty much resort that is completely based around the Drashigs. What happens if we all let them out of their cages? That is basically what this story is about, and we have this whole idea of one of the employees being killed, and basically all of the tensions surrounding that, and the people coming in order to evaluate the situation, almost the inspectors once again, sort of harking back to that first story. However, this episode almost gives Anne and the Fourth Doctor a little bit of time to relax. It is very much a fun story. We also have the new introduction to K9 in there as well, the newly built K9, and he has some really nice involvements within the actual story itself. Considering it is a new model, he starts to lose charge very, very quickly, and he is basically left within a swamp in order to regain power, and it turns out that he gets picked up by one of the other employees from Drashig World and kind of saved, and he does have some nice involvements within this story. It's nice to see K9 going up against the Drashigs. It's something that I would never expect to see, and I think that the key thing about this actual story is what it is trying to sell, the Drashigs and the Fourth Doctor, and there's nothing really too much else to it. It is basically one of those fun stories that is kind of just for the fans, and I don't really mind it. It's light-hearted and different, but also at the same time has that darker theme of people's deaths who are employed within a different company and kind of who is responsible for that death. And I think that the only criticism that I have for this story is maybe that it doesn't really offer anything else other than what you are expecting. It doesn't really stretch out that boundary or do anything too experimental. It's just an enjoyable listen and nothing really anything more than that. This episode does also contribute the idea of observing the Drashig's characteristics and actually going into their mind to discover their thought processes and what they are thinking, and I really like that aspect of the story. It's something that I simply just want to mention. I'm not going to say anything else about it. I'll leave you to kind of investigate the rest of that, but it was just a nice inclusion that once again made this story a bit more unique, and maybe in the future it would be nice to see Phil Mulryne come back and develop that further and maybe create an experimental monthly range story completely dedicated to the chomping, sluggish swamp creatures of the Drashigs, because hey, you can't sort of diss the Drashigs. They're cool, I like them. The third episode of the Syndicate Masterplan is The Enchantress of Numbers, as written by Simon Baynard and Paul Morris, and as you may be able to tell, I find it a little bit hard to actually pronounce the title of this story. I don't particularly know why. My mouth is weird, but I just can't pronounce it correctly. Enchantress, I just can't say it. But this episode is kind of one of those unique Big Finish stories that will probably be the least appealing to those new listeners, simply because it's something more that Big Finish would do as opposed to the new series, and we see Anne Kelso and the Fourth Doctor go into the past. To be exact, we actually see them visit Nottinghamshire in the 1850s, and we see the Doctor and his companion actually meet a rather important historical figure, being Ada Lovelace, the mother of computing and the daughter of Lord Byron, and she is a character that I don't really know too much about, and it is lovely to have a female character that is a historical figure at the same time. Of course, recently we've had Rosa Parks in series 11 of Doctor Who, and I think that Doctor Who for some reason tends to shy away from the historical female figures, especially within the classic series. I would love to see an episode based around Anne Frank at some point. I know that that is something a lot of people would like. Of course, we've seen an Agatha Christie story as well, but it would be nice to maybe see a few more in there, maybe, who knows, over the coming years. But this episode is unique simply because, once again, it blends that whole idea of an historical setting and actual events that occurred in actual history, and kind of giving it a Doctor Who twist. It is a little bit similar to that of the First Doctor Adventures Volume 3 with the Phoenicians that I have previously reviewed, where that was very much a pure historical, and we had sort of the Doctor's involvement in that story, almost involving history a little bit and kind of altering history in order for it to be the actual timeline that we understand as history today. And this episode is all based around basically a cybernetic sort of virus from the far, far future, and basically it has gone into the past to try and take over society and kill all of the humans, and it wants to overpower everyone. And where not best to start off with a cybernetic virus than at the very beginning, where computing first started to become a thing, before computers were actual devices, and we have that whole idea of programming and basically basically Ada Lovelace being one of the most sort of advanced mathematicians of her time period. And I must admit, I did really like her character. She was intriguing. She was also coping with illness in there as well, which for those of you that know the character, you will know a little bit more about that, but it would have been nice to maybe have a bit more context into that illness, exactly what it is and the side effects of it, because other than I feel ill and sort of the way that she suffers, we didn't really get to see too much more of that, or it didn't really go into any details, but it might have made the story a little bit more bleak, but maybe a bit more real at the same time. Ada Lovelace herself was portrayed by Finty Williams, and as I say, I think that she did a very good job. She is certainly one of the main contributions to this story that I did enjoy, and I did also like the way that Anne Kelso was in a historical setting. It is one of those things that Doctor Who tends to do. Take your latest companion into the far future, then take them into the deep past. It is a perfect way to introduce them into the series, and also at the same time something of which that new series Doctor Who does quite a lot, so you can certainly see how they are keeping the classic series Doctor Who elements in there with the Fourth Doctor, and the way that the story is and the characteristics of the Doctor himself, with K9 certainly being the most powerful person in the room, but also at the same time they're kind of changing it and altering it a little bit in order to have a much more 21st century contemporary feel that is much more suited to the new series audience. So if you're looking for a place to jump on with the Fourth Doctor, then these box sets are certainly a good place to start, because you have 4 different adventures as opposed to just one singular CD that we have seen with the Fourth Doctor series in previous years. I think that for some people the Enchantress of Numbers may be a little bit of a drag in the very middle, simply because it does rely a lot on that historical knowledge of the location and environment that you are visiting, and you kind of experience something in part 1 that is then later referred to in part 2, and you kind of have the Doctor and Anne actually going back on themselves and kind of explaining a little bit in order to give more context. So the first story is a little bit questionable, and you do think, what is going on? Am I missing something a little bit? And once again, this story does in fact deliver a much more quirky version of Anne Kelso. She's almost a bit more stripped back. She's out of her comfort zone because she's not a policewoman in this time period. She's much more just a servant to the Doctor, slipping into one of those lower class female roles almost from that historical time period. And she didn't really have too much to do, but she still had some nice moments in this story. I think that if anything, this was Tom Baker's episode 2 shine, where he had some nice sort of moments about emotions and kind of that whole idea with Ada Lovelace as well, and that relationship and actually them meeting each other, and the Doctor almost fangirling a little bit and kind of respecting who she is and almost respecting her legacy that goes on after that as well, kind of without actually referring to it to the actual character, because of course that will be against the laws of time and all that. Then we move on to the final episode of this review, The False Guardian, as written by Guy Adams, and this is where things start to fall into place. Of course, we had that original idea in the Sinestron Kill about this mysterious force, and this episode returns to that. We see the Doctor and Anne visit a planet simply because Anne has in fact been investigating. Between her different adventures with the Doctor, she's managed to try and solve different aspects of the crime. She wants to get an answer. Once again, those police characteristics coming in, and we see the Doctor almost letting Anne not necessarily fly the TARDIS, but take control as to where they go. And even though it is this early on in this new Companions era, I think that actually Jane Slavin does a very good job. I think that she's not really out of her depth, and I actually kind of believed in her having control over the TARDIS. It made a lot of sense, and it certainly let the character develop a little bit further. In fact, the story where the different components from the series key arc is in fact established in this series. Of course, we have the return to the planet Kemble, and we also have different features, as previously seen in the Daleks Masterplan, start to work its way into the Syndicate Masterplan. So for those of you that don't know, the Syndicate Masterplan is basically almost a sequel to the Daleks Masterplan, just without the Daleks, and this episode actually slowly introduces those themes back into Doctor Who once more. Of course, it has been many years since the previous adventure on Kemble with the first Doctor, and it is nice the way that the Doctor can actually recollect that adventure and actually think about the people that he previously met throughout that story. What I am slowly starting to see is that this box set is a little bit more than a sequel. Once again, it does want to actually advance and contribute something a little bit more to Kemble as a planet, it, and basically not just do a rerun of the Daleks Masterplan, because what is the point of that? What's the point in doing just a rerun of an adventure that we've had before? Instead it wants to advance that and do something different. However, The False Guardian is kind of in the early stages of doing that. I think the fair thing to say for this box set is it is very slowly introducing the arc. If anything, we have these slight references in the Sinestron kill, and then the return to the Sinestrons kind of in this story after Anne has been researching it. However, other than that, the two stories that are in the very middle, including the Drashigs, and then of course the Enchantress of Numbers in there as well, both of those episodes are self-contained. They do have a few references here and there, however nothing about the actual plot itself, from what I understand, is actually relating to the plot arc, meaning that you do only have two stories that are about the Syndicate Masterplan itself, so it is a nice introduction, although I do worry that a lot of responsibility has been left to be covered in that final box set. I'm guessing that the final episodes may be a little bit more indulged in the actual plot arc and a lot more focused around it, or at least I hope, because we have a lot of things that we need to cover, such as the rather weird and wonderful aliens that were originally seen in the Daleks Masterplan, which I must admit I know absolutely nothing about. I've never listened to the audio, I never watched one of the reconstructions. All I have seen is the most recent uni recreation of the Mission to the Unknown. They did a very good job of recreating the rather unusual gang of villains that were seen in that story, and I can't wait to see how they further develop that. Kemble has in fact been turned into a little bit of a health spa planet where people go in order to seek treatment for mental health and other health problems, where they basically have suffered throughout the universe, and they go to this planet in order to seek medical attention in a more therapeutic level, and we see the Fourth Doctor and Anne become people who are receiving that treatment throughout this episode. And what is really nice about this story is, once again, it is fast-paced, much like the previous adventures, but it has something about it that just seems very modern and sort of, once again, blockbuster, because you have that whole idea of Kemble returning, a rather unusual character who believes he is the ruler of the universe, also known as Mavic Chen, that was originally seen once again in the Daleks Masterplan, in fact played by John Shrapnel, and he is Nigel Colloon, the character that he plays, and he believes that he is basically Mavic Chen. And what I really like about his character, and especially the way that Guy Adams has written this story, is that we basically see this, probably a commander, I'm presuming that he was at some point, and he's quite obviously been a quite high authority at some point in the universe, and he has become somebody who has got under quite a lot of mental strain, and in this story we kind of see him suffering from that, him getting a little bit of treatment for his issues he is currently dealing with, and we also get to see almost an unhealthy side to a character. And I really do like the way that Guy Adams has actually presented that. It is a rather adult theme, and it doesn't really take too much from the actual story itself. It is very fast-paced and exciting, but I do like the way that that has been actually incorporated into the plot. As I say, it's very adult, and also I like the way that the Doctor actually sits down with him and has a little bit of a conversation, and kind of, even though it is a serious topic, the Fourth Doctor still has a rather light-hearted side of him to kind of deal with it, and I think that his character, or at least Nigel Colloon, kind of sees that and respects him for it. And I do feel a little bit like I'm lacking knowledge for this story, I must admit. I feel like some of those elements from the Daleks Masterplan I need to go back and revisit. I might need to try and look up the reconstruction at some point in order to get a further bit of context, but I think that this is a great way to actually introduce the Daleks Masterplan once more, and the planet of Kemble, and the horrific actual plants that are seen within that story. There is a wonderful moment where the Doctor actually interacts with somebody that has been infected and is slowly getting taken over by one of the, I do believe they call them Varga plants, I think, and you basically see them slowly turning into a zombie, and it is very horrific actually. I was really impressed with the way that both Tom Baker actually acted that role, but also the way that Guy Adams actually written that story as well. I think that something that I'm coming to realise with his scripts is they are very fun. The comic relief that bounces off both the Doctor as well as K9, he is much more returning harkening back to that sassy version of K9 that I have witnessed in a few of the Fourth Doctor and Romana adventures. He is a logical robot, therefore you use that in a rather sarcastic way, and I really love that because it really does add another sort of level to this story that is really funny and once again enjoyable. And that is a whole theme for this box set. It's very enjoyable and easy to listen to, and it's nothing particularly too challenging either. And that is that for Doctor Who, the Fourth Doctor Adventures on Big Finish, the Syndicate Masterplan, Series 8, Volume 1. Join me next time in my next Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review, as I'll be taking a look at the Fourth Doctor Series 8, Volume 2 of the Syndicate Masterplan, where we have 4 further adventures with the Fourth Doctor and WPC and Kelso. And I'm really intrigued to see how this actual series finishes off. What happens, what adventures do we go on, and I can't wait to start listening to it. In fact, I think I may start listening immediately after filming this review. So I hope you join me next time, and if you have any questions about this actual release, then please do leave them in the description below, and I will be more than happy to respond to them at some point in the near future. So thank you for watching. I'm going to listen to more Big Finish, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.